And thank you so much for your time. My name is Morgan Haydock. I'm a student at Bethesda Junior College. I've been here for years. I'm speaking to you tonight to urge you to pass a proposed new smoking policy that would allow campuses to ban smoking. In the time that I've been at MJC, I've been exposed to secondhand smoke more times than I can count. At MJC, you can't sit at a bench or a picnic table without inevitably getting engulfed by a cloud of cigarette smoke or vape smoke. Consistently throughout my time at MJC, it has been myself and my peers who have had to leave outdoor spaces on our own campus because there's no policy in place to protect our health. It's not fair that a majority of the student population does not smoke, but still has to suffer the consequences that smoking can bring in order to accommodate those that do. I think we can all agree that students should be able to get their education in a healthy environment. But right now, only students at UCs and CSUs are guaranteed a smoke-free campus. Is the health of students at those colleges more worthy of protection than that of myself and my peers?
Is pretty much young adults are learning the history and they're learning to take action on that history. So now young adults are going out, advocating for themselves, becoming empowered, changing the narrative, and learning that currently this needs to change, or else we will have a dilapidated environment and we will have a dilapidated healthcare system.
They don't care about our life. They don't care what it does to us. They care about their profit. That has not changed in the last 75 years. The vaping devices that they're marketing today are how they're making their money off addicting people, young people.
The solution is really, just not having these products around in the first place. They play no positive social redemptive quality. There's nothing about them that is good for any of us. They're addictive. When young people start to use them, it changes their brain chemistry, the nicotine does, and makes them susceptible to all other types of addiction.
The planet is under heavy attack, and it is an existential time for climate action, or trying to protect and defend our planet. So
it only takes one voice to really pull in others that are feeling the same, and then it becomes a collective movement. So it really requires the bravery of a few to bring in everyone else who is actually resonating with some of the messaging that you might have, right?
My name is Johnny, and I joined the Young Adults Fighting Tobacco Coalition because it offers community-based solutions to environmental justice and tobacco-related problems. Now, those are a lot of big words. I would know I wrote them that way and rehearsed them, because what I'm going to bring to you now is even more boring. I joined the Young Adults Fighting Tobacco Coalition about 3 years ago now. And what I would say from all of that is that never has an organization been so confirming in this idea. So what has been the most attractive to me and what has kept me here for 3 years is that the coalition is committed to building community and renewing that civic life for young adults, as opposed to just harvesting up young adults to make them the most effective lobbyists or protesters, but to truly empower young adults like me to really make that change and make that difference in the world. And that starts with strong communities. The Young Adults Fighting Tobacco Coalition also caught my eye because it is much more interested not in being the most prestigious or the most cool or the most hip group, or even trying to be a club, but trying to be a community in of itself that prepares its members and wider communities for being further engaged in the world they live in and to help prepare them for this long and difficult fight for a more fair and free society on a more healthy and fairly treated world.
Hi, my name is Jose Montoya. I work for the California Health Collaborative in the STAND program. We focus on tobacco issues in rural areas. I specifically coordinate a young adult coalition.
Okay, awesome. And so can you tell us a bit about the history of modern tobacco and why it's important to understand?
Well, history is really important to understand, specifically in tobacco control. That's a good way to gauge success against an industry that's causing havoc on not just health, but the environment. So holistically, this industry is attacking the populace here in the US and other countries. It's not a good product, but history is a really good indicator of where does something come from and where is the future and where is it going to lead to? Where is it evolving or the evolution of it going, right?
Let's start from the beginning. So how did tobacco become so involved in U.S. economy?
Well, in the early 1600s, you had indigenous folk in the Americas find tobacco, and they used it for ceremonial purposes. And typically, when they used it, it was to help themselves for medicinal purposes. When folks came from other continents to the Americas, they introduced it as a welcoming gesture. Unfortunately, that welcoming gesture became something that was capitalized upon, and tobacco became a currency for colonization and other forms of plantations and economic growth here in the Americas. From there, in the late 1600s, then you had the late 1700s, where the colonies grew here in the United States, specifically in Virginia. And in Virginia, you had plantations that were growing this and exporting this to other countries. When the Revolutionary War started, there's actually a quote by Benjamin Franklin that's in one of his books, and one of his writings to Washington was, "Hey, if you can't send money, currency, send us tobacco, and that would take care of our debts for this war." So I think that's an interesting indicator of or an interesting quote, and it shows how tobacco was used as a currency in the early stages of the U.S. being founded.
Awesome. And then can you talk about when it gets really prominent in U.S. culture, when tobacco has become used by pretty much everyone in a social way, particularly the 1900s? Can you talk about that time and how it was involved in the women's movement?
Yes. It was the 20th century. Everybody was smoking, and definitely what was being looked at was how the rates were really high in smoking, but the rates were really low in smoking amongst women. There was this character, his name is Edward Bernays, a marketing guru that actually did some research with some people like his uncle, Sigmund Freud. And what they did is they found out that women wanted, and this is what they found, is that women at the time wanted to feel empowered, specifically because they couldn't vote. So Edward Bernays he created an interesting narrative and hired some women to actually stage a protest in New York. And he actually got the permitting and all that together and told the media, hey, there's going to be an event, and they held this women's march, it was called, and he let the women know that, hey, once the media's there, I'm going to give you a sign and you just light up. And it was what the way he labeled it and marketed it to the media was he let them know, media know, that a good line would be called Torches of Freedom. So Torches of Freedom was the term and the narrative they went with. And the next day, everybody in the media was talking about this Torches of Freedom. And the symbol was there. The symbol was lit, where folks now saw this as a way to empower themselves and have a smoke. From there, you had a huge influx of women smoking, and the rates went high. But Edward Bernays was one of the first that started that. Historically, what Edward Bernays started is still going on now, and that's why we see now currently big tobacco has marketed towards people that are suffering or in a social justice arena, and they focus on the narrative of empowerment through smoking, and that big tobacco has your back. That's trickery that Edward Bernays created under his public relations firm.
Awesome. And then, since we're talking about marketing, can you talk about some of the marketing schemes that Big Tobacco has used over the years, even using now still?
Yes, historically, Edward Bernays was the first public relations that they were really using. The other way is product placement in movies, and there's a whole series of conversations that are had in the tobacco documents at UCSF. And product placement was probably the biggest way that they were promoting their hazardous material. And one of the ways they did this is they would tell, say, a movie producer, hey, we will sponsor your movie, just make sure you share our brand of tobacco in your movie. And there's a really famous document that's shown on there in the tobacco documents at UCSF, and it's Sylvester Stallone, and pretty much him and an executive are writing back and forth, talking about how much money is going to get paid in the next upcoming movies that are going to be shown and produced, and how that specific product of tobacco is going to be shown in those movies. I thought that was interesting when I found it, and anybody can look at these documents. They're online at UCSF tobacco documents. But that's one way. There's other ways of product placement in shows and actually new industry like Netflix, where now they're showing vape products in many of the young adult targeted shows. So that's another good example of the trickery that big tobacco, encompasses themselves in.
All right. Just to finish off, what would you say we are at now in regards to the tobacco industry? What are some biggest challenges?
Currently, we're at the stage of endgame. We really feel that we can stop and change things for the future by organizing young adult coalitions, becoming part of organizations or coalitions like Young Adults Fighting Tobacco. There is something that's different from these coalitions, and what it is young adults are learning the truth of their past history, therefore confronting their truth nowadays. And what that means is pretty much young adults are learning the history, and they're learning to take action on that history. So now young adults are going out, advocating for themselves, becoming empowered, changing the narrative, and learning that currently this needs to change, or else we will have a dilapidated environment and we will have a dilapidated healthcare system, because we know, and from research, and we know that nicotine and tobacco dependency only cause heartache, not just physically but mentally. And we know that the environment, those forever chemicals that are leaching into our water, that's also causing really bad things like diabetes. We know it's causing things like heart failure. We know all these things are now occurring, and this is actionable. This is actionable information that now we can take action and educate ourselves on. And that's why it's important to join organizations or coalitions like YAFT, Young Adults Fighting Tobacco.